Commander Jake Morrison sat in his captain's chair aboard the colony ship Endeavour, watching the stars drift past through the main view screen. The ship hummed quietly around him as his crew worked at their stations. The daily communication window with Earth would open in 10 minutes, and Jake expected nothing more than the usual reports. About supply schedules and personnel transfers, the bridge was calm and peaceful. Lieutenant Sam Davis monitored the navigation systems while engineer Katie Williams checked the power readings from her console. Communications Officer Ben Parker prepared to receive the transmission from home. These daily check-ins had become routine over the past 3 years of their deep space mission. Earth Command always sent updates about new colonists, equipment shipments, and mission directives. Jake had been commanding starships for 15 years, ever since humanity first reached beyond their solar system. He remembered the early days when every alien contact was treated as a major event. Now humans worked alongside dozens of different species across the galaxy. The Interstellar Council had reluctantly accepted humanity as members only 5 years ago, though many alien species still viewed them as newcomers who expanded too quickly. The communication panel beeped softly. Ben Parker opened the channel and Earth signal came through clearly. Admiral Helen Brooks appeared on the screen, sitting in her office at Command Headquarters in Geneva. Behind her, Jake could see the familiar blue sky of Earth through the window. "Good morning, Endeavour," Admiral Brooks said with a smile. "I hope your mission to the Kepler system is proceeding smoothly. We have the weekly updates for you." She began reading from her datapad. "Colony ship Aurora will be launching next month with additional terraforming equipment for your operation. The new settlers include 50 families and 30 specialists in atmospheric processing." Jake nodded and made notes on his own pad. This was exactly the kind of routine information they received every day. Nothing seemed unusual or urgent in the Admiral's tone. "Personnel updates," Admiral Brooks continued. "Dr. Lisa Chin has been assigned to your science team and will arrive with the Aurora. Engineer Mark Thompson is being transferred back to Earth for family reasons. Supply ship Victory will reach your position in 6 weeks with the requested mining equipment and medical supplies." The transmission lasted 20 minutes. Admiral Brooks covered everything from technical specifications to news from other human colonies. She mentioned that the research station on Kepler 442b was making good progress studying local plant life. The mining operation on Asteroid Base 7 had exceeded production targets. 3 new diplomatic agreements had been signed with alien trading partners. "That covers everything on this end," Admiral Brooks concluded. "Keep up the excellent work out there. Earth is proud of what you're accomplishing. We'll talk again tomorrow at the usual time." The transmission ended and the screen went dark. Jake turned to his crew. "Standard updates only," he told them. "Nothing requiring immediate action. Katie, how are our systems running?" "All green across the board," Katie Williams replied. "Engines are performing perfectly. Life support is stable. We should reach Kepler 442b right on schedule." Meanwhile, 20 light-years away, Captain Lisa Brooks stood in the observation dome of Research Station Alpha on Kepler 442b. She watched the alien sunrise paint the sky in shades of purple and gold. This world was beautiful and potentially perfect for human colonization once the atmospheric processors finished their work. Dr. Peter Grant joined her at the observation window. "The plant samples from yesterday's expedition are fascinating," he said. "Some of them seem to process sunlight more efficiently than anything we've seen before. If we can understand how they work, we might be able to improve our own food production." Lisa nodded. "How many people do we have on the surface today?" 12 teams, Peter replied. Katie Williams took a group to study the mineral deposits in the northern mountains. The geology team is mapping underground water sources. Everyone should be back by evening. Research Station Alpha housed 43 humans who were conducting the first detailed study of this world. They had been here for 8 months, sending daily reports back to Earth about their discoveries. The work was challenging but rewarding. Every day brought new insights about this alien ecosystem, Lisa walked to the communication center where operator Danny Clark was preparing for the daily transmission to Earth. These reports were important for planning the full colonization effort that would begin next year. "Ready to transmit, Captain," Danny said. "I have the geological surveys, biological analysis reports, and atmospheric readings all prepared." "Go ahead and send," Lisa told him. She had written her own report about the team's progress and recommendations for future missions. Everything was proceeding exactly according to plan. Far across the galaxy, on the gleaming capital world of Nexus Prime, the Interstellar Council was preparing for their monthly meeting. The massive chamber could hold representatives from over 200 different species, though only about 50 were permanent members with voting rights. Council Chairman Vexstar of the Zephyrian Empire arrived early and took his position at the central podium. His reptilian features showed the calm confidence of someone who had held power for many years. The Zephyrians controlled the largest military force in the galaxy and dominated most council decisions through a combination of influence and intimidation. Science Director Crystalline Mind of Stars floated into the chamber, her translucent body catching the light from the overhead panels. The Altarians were ancient and wise, but they had grown concerned about the rapid expansion of newer species, particularly humans. Their crystalline forms could live for thousands of years, giving them a very different perspective on galactic politics. "The human situation requires discussion," Vexstar announced as other council members took their seats. "Their expansion continues at an unacceptable rate. In the past year alone, they have established colonies in 12 new systems." Crystalline Mind of Stars pulsed with soft blue light, her way of expressing agreement. "Their technological development is also concerning," she added. "They have developed new terraforming techniques that work faster than our established methods. Some of our member species are beginning to request human assistance instead of using traditional Altarian services." Other council members murmured their concerns. The insectoid Nexari representative clicked his mandibles in annoyance. The gaseous ethereal delegate's form flickered with agitation. Even the peaceful Sylvan ambassador seemed worried about human influence spreading too quickly. "We have imposed economic sanctions," Vexstar continued. "We have restricted their access to certain trade routes. We have limited their voting rights in council decisions. Yet they continue to expand and develop, as if our restrictions mean nothing to them." The council had been frustrated with humanity for months. Humans were supposed to be the junior members of galactic civilization, grateful for the opportunity to learn from older and wiser species. Instead, they acted with independence and confidence that many aliens found irritating. Perhaps stronger measures are needed, suggested the Nexari representative. Economic pressure alone may not be sufficient to control their ambitions. "Patience," advised Crystalline Mind of Stars. "Humans are still young as a species. They will learn to accept their proper place in the galactic order. Our sanctions will eventually force them to negotiate more reasonably." The council meeting continued for several hours, with most of the discussion focused on ways to limit human expansion and influence. None of the alien representatives considered that humans might have their own plans for dealing with the council's hostility. As the Endeavor continued its journey through space, Jake Morrison had no idea that this would be the last normal day in human history. The routine transmission from Admiral Brooks would be the final communication between Earth and the colony ships. Within 24 hours, every human voice in the galaxy would fall silent, leaving behind only empty ships and abandoned worlds. The Great Silence was coming, and the Interstellar Council would soon learn the true cost of underestimating humanity. 3 weeks had passed since the last human transmission, and the silence was becoming impossible to ignore. Captain Lisa Brooks stood in the communication center of Research Station Alpha, staring at the dead screens that should have been buzzing. With messages from Earth, Communications Officer Danny Clark had tried every frequency, every backup channel, every emergency protocol they knew. "Still nothing, Captain," Danny said quietly. His voice carried the weight of growing fear that everyone on the station now felt. I've been broadcasting on all human frequencies for 72 hours straight. No response from Earth, no response from any colony, no response from any human ship anywhere in the galaxy. Lisa felt a cold knot forming in her stomach. In 8 months of operation, they had never gone more than 6 hours without some kind of communication from the human network. Ships checked in regularly, colonies sent daily reports, and Earth Command maintained constant contact with all their operations. The idea that every single human outpost could go silent at the same time made no sense. Dr. Peter Grant entered the communication center with a worried expression. The automated supply drone from Mining Station Beta was supposed to arrive yesterday. He said, "It never showed up. I sent a team to check the landing coordinates, but there's no sign of it anywhere." "Maybe it had mechanical problems," Lisa suggested, though she didn't believe it herself. The supply drones were incredibly reliable, and Mining Station Beta had never missed a delivery in the 6 months since operations began. "I don't think so," Peter replied. "The drone's tracking beacon went dead at exactly the same time we lost communication with all human facilities. That can't be a coincidence." Katie Williams joined them, carrying a datapad filled with sensor readings. "I've been monitoring all the communication satellites in this system," she said. "Every piece of human technology is still functioning perfectly. The problem isn't with our equipment. The problem is that nobody is talking." The research station had 43 people, and all of them were starting to show signs of stress. They were scientists and engineers, not soldiers, and the complete breakdown of communication with the rest of humanity was beyond anything they had trained for. Some people suggested that maybe Earth was under attack, but there had been no distress signals, no emergency broadcasts, no indication of any kind of crisis. Meanwhile, on Nexus Prime, the Interstellar Council was dealing with problems they had never expected. Trade routes that had depended on human cargo ships were beginning to fail. The efficient supply networks that humans had established were breaking down without any explanation. Floating thought crystal drifted through the council chambers, her crystalline form pulsing with confused patterns of light. As one of the few Altarian leaders who had developed respect for human capabilities, she was among the first to realize that something serious had happened. "The economic data is concerning," she announced to the emergency session that council Chairman Vexstar had called. 17 different trade routes are showing significant delays. The human cargo vessels that normally handle 30% of all interstellar shipping have simply stopped operating. Vexstar dismissed her concerns with a wave of his scaled hand. "The humans are trying to pressure us by disrupting trade." He said, "This is obviously their response to our economic sanctions. They think they can force us to negotiate by causing minor inconveniences." "These are not minor inconveniences," Floating Thought Crystal replied, her light patterns shifting. "To display complex financial data. The human-operated mining facilities on 12 worlds have ceased all operations. Their terraforming projects have been abandoned. Most critically, the early warning systems they installed throughout the Outer Rim territories are no longer being maintained." The early warning systems were a particular concern. Humans had developed sophisticated sensor networks that could detect approaching threats from deep space. These systems had prevented several potential conflicts by giving advance notice of hostile movements. Without human technicians to maintain them, the networks were beginning to show signs of failure. Council member known as Wisdom Flows, a tentacled philosopher from the scholarly aquatic collective, raised a disturbing possibility. "Perhaps we should consider that the humans have not chosen this silence," he suggested. "What if something has happened to them?" The suggestion caused an uproar in the council chambers. Representatives from dozens of species began talking at once, their various forms of communication creating a chaotic mix of sounds, lights, and chemical signals. The idea that an entire species could simply disappear was almost unthinkable. Impossible. Vexstar declared, "Humans have colonies in over 50 systems. They have ships scattered throughout the galaxy. They have research stations in the most remote locations. Nothing could affect all of them simultaneously." But even as he spoke, reports were coming in that supported known as wisdom flows theory. The Nexari collective had tried to contact human trading partners about a grain shipment and received no response. The Ethereal Republic had sent diplomatic messages to 3 different human colonies without getting any replies. Even the mechanical, synthetic Concordat, which rarely communicated with organic species, had noticed that human data networks had gone completely quiet. Dr. Sarah Henderson was experiencing the mystery from a different perspective. She had been working on the ancient world of Tau Ceti III, studying precursor ruins alongside her research partner known as Wisdom Flows. As one of the few humans conducting joint research with alien colleagues, Sarah had maintained regular contact with both human and non-human institutions. I find it strange that Sarah has not responded to our daily research discussions, known as Wisdom Flows mentioned during a private communication with Floating Thought Crystal. For 6 months, we have exchanged findings every day at precisely the same time. 3 weeks ago, these communications simply stopped. Sarah's research had been groundbreaking. She was one of the few humans who understood the complex mathematics behind precursor technology. Her insights had helped unlock several ancient devices that other species had studied unsuccessfully for centuries. The idea that she would abandon her work without explanation seemed completely out of character. Have you tried contacting her through official channels? Floating Thought Crystal asked. I have sent messages through the university, through the Research Foundation, and through diplomatic channels, known as Wisdom Flows replied. Every human institution has stopped responding to communications. It is as if the entire species has chosen to ignore the rest of the galaxy. The economic effects were becoming more severe each day. Human-manufactured goods had been surprisingly important to interstellar commerce. Their translation software had become the standard for diplomatic communications between species that couldn't understand each other directly. Their medical techniques had been adopted by hospitals throughout the galaxy. Their agricultural methods had helped feed populations on dozens of worlds. More troubling were the security implications. Human peacekeeping forces had been quietly preventing conflicts in over 30 border regions. Their diplomatic corps had been mediating disputes that could have escalated into wars. Their intelligence services had been tracking criminal organizations and terrorist groups that threatened multiple species. The Zephyrian Empire was the first to take advantage of the situation. With human peacekeepers no longer patrolling the border regions, Zephyrian military forces began moving into territories that had been under human protection. Several smaller species that depended on human security guarantees found themselves facing the possibility of Zephyrian occupation. This may be an opportunity, Vextar told his military advisors during a private meeting. If the humans are truly gone, we can claim their territories and resources. The Council has restricted our expansion for too long, but with humans out of the picture, we can take what we need. But Floating Thought Crystal was beginning to understand the true scope of the problem. She had been analyzing the economic data more carefully, and the results were frightening. Humans hadn't just been participants in galactic civilization. They had been holding much of it together through their work behind the scenes. The galactic shipping network was starting to break down, without human logistics coordination. The diplomatic communication systems were failing without human translation services. Most critically, the ancient precursor defense systems that protected several major worlds were showing signs of malfunction without human maintenance. We need to send investigation teams to human territories immediately, Floating Thought Crystal urged the Council. If something has truly happened to them, we need to understand what it was and whether it poses a threat to other species. Vextar finally agreed to authorize limited investigation missions, though he still believed the humans were simply trying to manipulate the galactic community. The investigation teams would discover the truth soon enough, but by then it would be too late. To prevent the cascade of problems that humanity's absence was already causing, the Great Silence continued, and every day brought new evidence that the galaxy was far more dependent on human contributions than anyone had realized. The investigation team from the Altarian Science Division approached Earth's solar system with growing unease. Captain Zara of the Deep Crystals had led dozens of research missions throughout the galaxy, but she had never encountered anything like the reports they were receiving from the advanced scouts. "The outer monitoring stations are completely abandoned," reported her second-in-command, Crystal that sees far. "All equipment is functioning normally, but there are no life signs anywhere. The stations appear to have been evacuated, but we can find no record of any evacuation orders." Zara of the Deep Crystals studied the sensor readings from her crystalline bridge. The data made no sense according to everything she knew about human behavior. Humans were careful and methodical people who documented everything they did. The idea that they would abandon their posts without leaving detailed records was completely contrary to their nature. "What about the inner system?" she asked. "Even more puzzling," Crystal that sees far replied. "The automated defense platforms are still operational, but they're not responding to our identification signals. It's as if they're waiting for someone who isn't there." The investigation team had been traveling for 2 weeks to reach the Sol system. During that time, similar teams had been dispatched to major human colonies throughout the galaxy. All of them were reporting the same impossible findings: human settlements that were completely intact but entirely empty. As they approached Earth itself, the mystery deepened. The planet's orbital installations were fully powered and operational. Communication satellites continued their regular broadcasts, but the signals contained only automated system status reports. The great space elevators that connected Earth's surface to the orbital shipyards were still moving cargo, but the cargo bays contained only supplies that had been loaded weeks ago. "Take us into standard orbit," Zara of the Deep Crystals commanded. "Begin detailed surface scans of the major population centers." The scans revealed something that chilled even the ancient Altarian crystals. Cities stood perfectly preserved but completely empty. Vehicles sat abandoned in streets with their engines still running. Buildings showed all the signs of normal daily life, but no people anywhere. It was as if the entire human population had simply vanished in the middle of their normal activities. Meanwhile, another investigation team was making equally disturbing discoveries on the merchant vessel Liberty Star. Captain Rick Taylor's ship had been found drifting in deep space, exactly where its flight plan indicated it should be. The Nexari boarding party had expected to find evidence of mechanical failure or possible attack, but instead they found something far more unsettling. The ship was in perfect condition. All systems were operating normally. The cargo hold contained valuable, rare metals that would have been worth a fortune to pirates. Captain Taylor's personal belongings were undisturbed in his quarters. His coffee cup sat on the bridge console, still half full but long since cold. Commander Hivemind 7 of the Nexari Collective studied the ship's computer logs with growing confusion. The final entry was made at 13:47 Standard Time on the day of the silence, he reported to his investigation team. Captain Taylor logged routine patrol activities and mentioned plans to visit his daughter Amy on Mars colony. There is no indication of any problems or unusual events. The Nexari were logical creatures who approached problems through systematic analysis. They had boarded dozens of human ships over the past week, and all of them told the same story. Normal operations, routine activities, and then suddenly nothing. No distress signals, no emergency protocols, no sign of struggle or conflict. "Check the life support systems again," Hivemind 7 ordered. Perhaps there was some kind of atmospheric contamination that affected the crew, but the life support readings were perfect. The air was clean and breathable. The water systems were functioning normally. The food stores were fresh and properly preserved. Whatever had happened to the crew of the Liberty Star, it had nothing to do with equipment failure or environmental hazards on Earth. The Altarian ground teams were making their most disturbing discovery yet. In a small town in Colorado, they found the home of retired Admiral Susan Clark. The house showed every sign of recent habitation. Fresh food sat in the refrigerator. Clothes hung in the closet. A book lay open on the bedside table with a bookmark. Halfway through, most mysteriously, automated systems throughout the house were still running perfectly. The garden sprinklers continued their daily cycle. The security system armed and disarmed itself according to its programmed schedule. Even more strangely, Admiral Clark's pet cat had also vanished, along with every other animal that humans had brought to Earth from other worlds. "This defies all logical explanation," Crystal that sees far reported to the orbital command ship. "Humans did not simply leave these places. All evidence suggests they disappeared instantaneously while engaged in normal daily activities." The most significant discovery came from a research facility on the edge of Zephyrian space. Dr. Ben Murphy had been conducting classified research into advanced physics, and his laboratory contained equipment that most species didn't fully understand. The Zephyrian investigation team had brought their best scientists to analyze his work. General Scar of Victory led the Zephyrian team through Dr. Murphy's laboratory. The reptilian commander was more interested in potential military applications than scientific theory, but even he could see that Murphy had been working on something extraordinary. "These calculations are beyond our current understanding," admitted Chief Scientist Scale of Wisdom as he studied Murphy's research notes. He appears to have been investigating something called quantum consciousness transfer. The mathematics involved are incredibly complex. The laboratory contained months of detailed research into what Murphy called collective species transcendence. His notes described theoretical methods for transferring consciousness across dimensional barriers. Most of the alien scientists dismissed these ideas as impossible fantasy, but the precision of Murphy's calculations suggested he had been working on something very real. The final entry in Murphy's research log was dated the same day as the universal silence. Scale of Wisdom read it aloud to the investigation team. "The calculations are complete. We understand now what we must do. The Council will learn the price of underestimating humanity." General Scar of Victory snorted in disgust. "Typical human arrogance," he said. "Even in their final research logs, they cannot resist making threats against their betters." But Scale of Wisdom was more thoughtful. He had spent years studying human scientific achievements, and he knew they were far more capable than most aliens wanted to admit. "Perhaps we should take this more seriously," he suggested. "Human scientists have surprised us before with their innovations." The investigation team spent another week gathering evidence from human territories throughout the galaxy. Every discovery confirmed the same impossible truth. Humanity had vanished simultaneously across hundreds of star systems without leaving any trace of how or why it had happened. Some aliens began to theorize that humans had been eliminated by an unknown enemy. Others suggested that some kind of plague or environmental disaster had affected only humans and their companion animals. A few radical thinkers even proposed that humans had developed technology that allowed them to leave the galaxy entirely. Council Chairman Vexstar refused to accept any explanation that gave humans credit for their own disappearance. "This is obviously an elaborate deception," he declared during an emergency council session. "Humans are hiding somewhere, probably in some remote system we haven't discovered yet. They think they can pressure us into making concessions by pretending to be gone." But Floating Thought Crystal had studied all the investigation reports, and she was beginning to understand the true scope of what had happened. "The evidence suggests that humans achieved something that we thought was impossible," she told the council. "They may have found a way to transcend physical existence entirely." The council members rejected this possibility as ridiculous fantasy, but they could not explain the evidence any other way. Humans had vanished completely and simultaneously across the entire galaxy, leaving behind only empty ships, abandoned cities, and the growing realization that galactic civilization had been far more dependent on human contributions than anyone had understood. As the investigation teams returned to Nexus Prime with their disturbing reports, the first signs of systemic collapse were already beginning to appear throughout the galaxy. The Great Silence was having consequences that no one had anticipated, and the worst was yet to come. 6 months after humanity's disappearance, the galaxy was starting to understand the true price of their absence. Commander Hivemind 7 stood on the bridge of his Nexari warship, watching in horror as the precursor defense grid around the Altarian homeworld began its catastrophic failure. The ancient energy barriers that had protected the crystalline civilization for thousands of years were flickering and sparking with dangerous power surges. Without human technicians to maintain the delicate systems, the automated defenses were overloading one by one. Hive Mind 7 had brought his fleet to assist with evacuation efforts, but they were too late to prevent the disaster. "The primary grid is collapsing," reported his tactical officer. "Energy discharge levels are approaching critical thresholds. We need to move our ships to minimum safe distance." The Nexari fleet pulled back just as the defense grid released a massive burst of energy that swept across 3 planets in the Altarian system. The beautiful crystal cities that had stood for millennia simply disintegrated under the force of the uncontrolled discharge. Billions of crystalline beings died in moments, their ancient wisdom and knowledge lost forever. Floating thought crystal barely escaped the destruction, her consciousness transferred to a backup crystal matrix just before her homeworld was consumed. As one of the few surviving Altarian leaders, she now faced the impossible task of rebuilding her civilization from almost nothing. "How many of our people survived?" she asked through emergency communication channels. "Less than 10%, came the devastating reply from another survivor. "Most of our population centers were within the blast radius. The outer colonies and research stations are intact, but we have lost our cultural heart." The disaster sent shockwaves throughout the galactic community. The Altarians had been one of the oldest and most stable civilizations in the galaxy. If their advanced technology couldn't protect them without human assistance, what hope did? Younger species have. General Scar of Victory received the news of the Altarian catastrophe while dealing with his own crisis. The Zephyrian Empire was fracturing as different military commanders fought for control of the territories that humans had abandoned. Without human diplomats to mediate disputes, old rivalries between Zephyrian factions had erupted into open warfare. "The Northern Fleet refuses to acknowledge my authority," reported Admiral Fang of Destruction during an emergency briefing. "They claim that I have no right to occupy human mining worlds without Council approval." Meanwhile, the Southern Fleet has already seized 3 human colonies and is demanding a larger share of the captured resources. Scar of Victory slammed his clawed hand on the tactical display. The Zephyrian Empire had been united for centuries, but the sudden availability of undefended human territories had awakened every ambitious general's dreams of personal conquest. "These fools don't understand that we need unity now more than ever," he growled. The problem was bigger than simple military politics. Human peacekeeping forces had been quietly preventing conflicts throughout Zephyrian space for years. They had mediated resource disputes, supervised prisoner exchanges, and maintained buffer zones between hostile factions. Without their stabilizing influence, the Empire was tearing itself apart. Meanwhile, pirate attacks had increased by 400% in regions where human patrol fleets once maintained order. The criminal organization known as the Black Void had emerged from hiding and was raiding shipping lanes with unprecedented boldness. Their leader, a mysterious figure called Shadow Walker, had united dozens of smaller pirate groups into a formidable fleet. Captain Wind Dancer of the peaceful Sylvan Republic found herself commanding one of the few remaining patrol fleets trying to protect civilian shipping. Her people were natural pacifists who preferred diplomacy to violence, but the pirates showed no interest in negotiation. "Another merchant convoy has been attacked near the Centauri Junction," her communications officer reported. "The pirates took everything of value and left the crews stranded in escape pods. This is the 4th attack this week." Wind Dancer studied the tactical display showing pirate movements throughout the sector. The pattern was clear and terrifying. "They're becoming more organized," she observed. "Someone is coordinating these attacks to maximize disruption of trade routes." The Sylvan Republic had always relied on human security guarantees to protect their merchant fleets. Their own ships were designed for exploration and scientific research, not combat. Facing well-armed pirates was like asking gardeners to fight. Professional soldiers, the economic collapse was spreading faster than anyone had anticipated. The ethereal republic, whose gaseous forms required specialized life support systems, found themselves unable to maintain their technology without human-manufactured components. Their energy-based civilization was slowly failing as critical systems broke down without replacement parts. Ambassador Mist of Tomorrow addressed the emergency council session through a flickering holographic projection. "Our atmospheric processes are failing," she reported. "Human engineers designed most of our life support infrastructure. Without their knowledge, we cannot repair or replace the failing components." Similar reports came from species throughout the galaxy. The mechanical synthetic concordat was experiencing cascade failures in their computer networks because human programmers had written much of their core software. The aquatic depth dwellers were losing their underwater cities as human-designed pressure systems failed. Even the energy beings of the Void Collective were having problems with the containment fields that allowed them to interact with physical matter. Council Chairman Vextar tried to maintain order during the emergency sessions, but his authority was crumbling along with everything else. "We must work together to solve these problems," he declared. "The human disappearance is a temporary setback, nothing more." But known as Wisdom Flows had been studying the economic data, and his analysis painted a terrifying picture. "The humans were not simply participants in our civilization," he announced to the council. "They were the foundation that held it together. Their disappearance has removed critical support structures that we never realized existed." The tentacled philosopher displayed complex charts, showing the interconnections between human activities and galactic stability. Human shipping companies handled 37% of all interstellar cargo. Human banks processed 42% of all interspecies financial transactions. Human diplomatic services mediated 68% of all trade disputes. Even more critical were the technical systems that humans had maintained throughout the galaxy. Ancient precursor technology required constant adjustment and repair by technicians who understood its complex operating principles. Most species had given up trying to learn these skills, preferring to hire human experts who seemed to have a natural talent for working with the ancient machines. The defense grids protecting 17 major worlds are now operating without maintenance. Known as Wisdom Flows continued. The automated mining systems on 43 asteroids have ceased production. The terraforming projects on dozens of worlds have been abandoned halfway through completion. The Nexari Collective had discovered another disturbing problem. The translation software that enabled communication between different species had been primarily developed and maintained by human programmers. As the software encountered new situations without human updates, errors were creeping into diplomatic communications. Simple misunderstandings were escalating into serious conflicts between species that could no longer trust the accuracy of their translations. "We intercepted communications suggesting that the Void Collective believes we are planning to attack their territory," HiveMind 7 reported. "The translation errors made our routine patrol reports sound like invasion preparations." The situation was becoming desperate. War seemed inevitable between multiple species. The galactic economy was collapsing and ancient defense systems were failing throughout known space. Some council members began to suggest that they needed to find humanity and convince them to return, but others refused to admit that the galaxy needed human help. Floating Thought Crystal, speaking from the ruins of her civilization, made a final plea to the council. "We must acknowledge the truth," she said. "Humanity was never the junior partner we thought they were. They were the invisible foundation that allowed our civilization to function. Without them, we are watching everything collapse." The great silence continued, and every day brought new evidence that the galaxy was completely unprepared to function without the humans they had taken for granted. 1 year after humanity's disappearance, the Interstellar Council was barely functioning. The once proud chambers on Nexus Prime were half empty as species after species withdrew from galactic politics to deal with their own survival crises. Council Chairman Vextar looked out at the scattered representatives who still attended meetings and wondered if this would be the day the government finally collapsed completely. The situation reports are getting worse, announced known as Wisdom Flows, who had become the unofficial coordinator of crisis management efforts. The Ethereal Republic has lost 3 more colonies to life support failures. The Synthetic Concordat is requesting emergency assistance with their computer networks. 7 species have declared they can no longer participate in interstellar trade due to security concerns. Floating Thought Crystal, speaking from her temporary refuge on a mining station, added her own grim update. The Altarian survivors are facing complete technological collapse. Without human maintenance, our remaining cities are losing power systems one by one. We estimate 6 months before our civilization becomes extinct. The assembled representatives sat in stunned silence. These were supposed to be the most advanced species in the galaxy, races that had mastered interstellar travel and built mighty civilizations. The idea that they could face extinction simply because one species had vanished seemed impossible to accept. Captain Nicole Brown of the deep space exploration vessel Starfinder was conducting one of the most desperate missions in galactic history. The Council had authorized massive rewards for any information about humanity's fate, and exploration teams were searching the most remote corners of known space for any trace of human activity. Sensor sweep complete of the outer spiral region, reported her science officer. No signs of human settlements, ships, or technology. This makes 47 systems we've searched without finding anything. Nicole studied the star charts spread across her navigation table. They had been searching for 8 months, following every possible lead and checking every system where humans might have established secret bases. The results were always the same: empty space where humans should have been. Captain, we're receiving a priority transmission from the exploration ship Voidseeker, her communications officer announced. They're reporting something unusual in the Magellan Nebula region. The transmission came from Captain Stone That Endures, Altarian explorer who had been searching the galactic core regions. His crystalline form flickered with excited energy patterns as he spoke. We have discovered an artificial structure hidden deep within the nebula, he reported. The design is unlike anything in our databases, but the energy signatures suggest advanced technology far beyond current galactic standards. Nicole felt her heart race with the first hope she had experienced in months. Are there any signs of human presence? Unknown, Stone That Endures replied. The structure is shielded against most of our sensors. We need ships with more advanced scanning equipment to investigate properly. Within days, a joint expedition consisting of ships from 6 different species was heading toward the Magellan Nebula. The structure they found there defied easy explanation. It was enormous, easily the size of a small moon, but it's crystalline. Surfaces seemed to exist in more dimensions than normal space allowed. The energy readings are off the charts, reported the expedition's chief scientist. This thing is generating power levels that should be impossible according to our understanding of physics. As they approached the mysterious structure, automated systems activated and began broadcasting a message in perfect galactic standard language. The voice that emerged from their speakers was unmistakably human, though it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. To the representatives of the galactic community, the message began. If you are receiving this transmission, it means you have finally begun to understand the true consequences of your actions. The expedition ships hung motionless in space as the message continued. We are the research team led by Dr. Ben Murphy. What you have discovered is a dimensional gateway that we constructed during the final months before our departure. Nicole Brown felt tears forming in her eyes as she recognized the voice of Dr. Murphy from the recordings they had found in his abandoned laboratory. The message explained everything that the investigation teams had been unable to understand. The Council's hostility toward humanity forced us to consider options that we had hoped never to use. Dr. Murphy's voice continued. Our research into quantum consciousness transfer revealed that it was possible for an entire species to transcend physical existence and move to a higher dimensional plane, The implications hit the expedition members like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't been destroyed or kidnapped by some unknown enemy. They had chosen to leave the galaxy entirely rather than continue dealing with the Council's restrictions and prejudice. We spent decades quietly holding your civilization together, the message explained. We prevented wars, maintained ancient technology, facilitated trade, and protected smaller species from aggression. We did this not because we expected gratitude, but because we believed in the possibility of a truly cooperative galactic community. Dr. Murphy's voice carried a tone of deep sadness as he described humanity's final decision. When it became clear that the Council would never accept us as equals, we chose to withdraw rather than fight. We left behind this message and this choice for you to make. The structure began projecting holographic displays showing the current state of galactic civilization. The images were devastating: collapsed economies, failed technologies, species on the brink of extinction, and wars spreading across dozens of systems. You now understand what your galaxy looks like without human involvement, the message continued. We did not create this crisis to punish you. We simply removed ourselves from systems that we had been maintaining out of duty and hope. But then, the message offered something that no one in the expedition had dared to hope for: a second chance. However, we have not abandoned all hope for galactic civilization, Dr. Murphy announced. This facility will monitor your progress for one standard: galactic year. If you can demonstrate that you have learned to value cooperation over domination, if you can achieve 12 months of peace and mutual assistance without human involvement, we will consider returning. The message provided specific criteria for what humanity would consider acceptable progress. Species needed to share technology freely rather than hoarding it for advantage. Trade disputes needed to be resolved through negotiation rather than force. Most importantly, stronger species needed to protect weaker ones instead of exploiting them. We will be watching, the message concluded. The choice is yours to make. The expedition returned to Nexus Prime with news that transformed the surviving Council members. For the first time in months, there was hope that the catastrophic decline could be reversed. But the price was acknowledging everything that humanity had tried to teach them through years of patient example. Vexstar struggled with the implications more than anyone else. His entire worldview had been based on the assumption that the Zephyrian Empire deserved to dominate smaller species through superior strength. The idea of cooperation and mutual assistance went against everything he had believed. They want us to become weak, he argued during the emergency council session. This talk of cooperation is just another way of saying that strong species should give up their natural advantages. But Floating Thought Crystal, speaking for the few remaining Altarians, saw things differently. Perhaps strength means something other than the ability to dominate others, she suggested. Perhaps true strength means building something that can survive and thrive without constant conflict. The debate continued for weeks as species throughout the galaxy grappled with humanity's challenge. Some, like the Nexari Collective, immediately began implementing the cooperative principles that humans had advocated. Others, like the remaining Zephyrian factions, resisted any change to the traditional power structures, but as the months passed and the crises continued to mount, more and more species began to understand that they had no choice but to try humanity's approach. The old system of competition and domination had led them to the brink of civilizational collapse. In the depths of space, aboard the colony ship Endeavor, Commander Jake Morrison watched the galaxy he had once called home struggling to learn the lessons that humanity had tried to teach for so many years. He and his crew existed now in a realm beyond physical matter. Their consciousness expanded to encompass possibilities that material beings could barely imagine. "Do you think they'll succeed?" asked Lieutenant Sam Davis, his awareness touching Jake's across the dimensional barriers that no longer constrained them. Jake considered the question while observing the alien species slowly, painfully learning to work together out of necessity rather than choice. "They're trying," he replied. "Whether they succeed or not will depend on whether they can overcome their pride." and fear long enough to build something better. The year of testing continued, and the future of galactic civilization hung in the balance as former enemies learned to become partners in survival.